Elias was born in 1922 in the rural outskirts of Georgia. His childhood was defined by the red clay of the earth and the heady weight of segregation. While white children in his town dreamed of becoming doctors or pilots, Elias's world was circumscribed by colored-only signs and the grueling labor of the fields. However, he possessed a natural brilliance for mechanics. By the age of 12, he was the only person in the county who could keep his father's battered Model T running with nothing more than scrap wire and intuition. He grew up in an era where black men were told they lacked the technical aptitude for modern machinery, a lie that Elias disproved every time he took an engine apart and put it back together in the dark. When the news of Pearl Harbor reached the South, Elias, like thousands of other young black men, rushed to enlist. He didn't just want to escape the poverty of the South, he wanted to prove that his citizenship was earned through sweat and, if necessary, blood. Training in the shadows. Upon entering the U.S. Army, Elias was met with a bitter reality. Despite his mechanical genius, the military was strictly segregated. High-ranking officials labeled black soldiers as unfit for combat, relegating them to service of supply units. Elias was assigned to a trucking company where he and his peers were trained at camps in the South, often facing more hostility from local white civilians and military police than they would later face from the Germans. They trained in the mud of Louisiana and the heat of Georgia, mastering the art of the 6x6, the GMC CCKW 2.5-ton truck. Elias became a lead driver, known for his ability to navigate blackout conditions using only the cat's eye slits on his headlights. They were preparing for a mission that hadn't even been named yet, honing skills that would soon become the only thing keeping the Allied advance from grinding to a halt. The birth of the Red Ball Express. Following the D-Day invasion in June 1944, the Allies found themselves in a crisis of success. General Patton's Third Army was moving so fast across France that they were outrunning their supply lines. Tanks were running dry, soldiers were running out of rations. The solution was the Red Ball Express, a massive non-stop trucking convoy designated by red balls on the trucks and route signs. From August to November 1944, the Express was a closed-loop system. Elias and 23 of his brothers-in-arms became the lifeblood of the war. Approximately 75% of these drivers were black. They were tasked with an impossible feat, delivering 412,193 tons of fuel, ammunition, and food. Elias's life became a blur of vibrating steering wheels and lukewarm coffee. The drivers were pushed to the absolute limit of human endurance, often driving 20 to 30 hours at a stretch. They navigated narrow, bombed-out French roads that were frequently booby-trapped or under fire from straggler German units. If a truck broke down, they fixed it in the mud. If a tire blew, they changed it under the cloak of night. Elias once recalled that the vibration of the truck stayed in his bones so deeply that even when he slept for an hour on the roadside, his body felt like it was still moving at 40 miles per hour. Patton's most valuable weapon. While the history books focused on Patton's tanks, Patton himself knew the truth. He famously remarked that the Red Ball Express was his most valuable weapon. Without Elias and the thousands of black drivers pushing through exhaustion, the liberation of Paris and the push towards the German border would have been impossible. Colonel John Eisenhower later noted that the advance across France simply could not have happened without the relentless drive of these men. Elias saw the horrors of war firsthand, not from a trench, but from the cab of a truck. He drove through liberated villages where French civilians cheered and through ghost towns where the stench of death was heavy. Through it all, he and his fellow drivers maintained a standard of excellence that shattered the military's racist assumptions. They weren't just supply troops, they were the logistical engineers of victory. The return to a cold welcome. When the war ended in 1945, Elias returned to Georgia. He wore his uniform with pride, expecting that his service, helping save the world from fascism, would change the way he was treated at home. He was wrong. He returned to a country that still forced him to the back of the bus and denied him the right to vote. The contributions of the 23,000 black soldiers of the Red Ball Express were systematically erased from the cinematic and literary retellings of the war. While movies like Patton showed the glory of the tanks, the black men who fueled those tanks were nowhere to be found. Elias spent the next several decades working as a master mechanic, quietly raising a family and telling his grandchildren stories of the Red Ball. He didn't ask for fame, but he felt the sting of being a forgotten liberator. A life of quiet service and final victory. In his later years, Elias became a pillar of his community. He used the skills he learned in the army to mentor young men in his neighborhood, teaching them how to repair engines and, more importantly, how to carry themselves with dignity in a world that might try to overlook them. He was a man of deep faith and tireless work ethic, often saying, "The road might be long, but as long as the wheels are turning, there's hope." Elias Thorne passed away in the early 1990s. At his funeral, his grandson placed a small red ball on his casket, a silent tribute to the months he spent driving through the darkness of France to bring light back to Europe. The legacy, breaking the silence. Today, we finally pull back the curtain on the Red Ball Express. We recognize that these 23,000 heroes were not just support, they were the backbone of the Allied effort. Their courage was not just in facing the enemy, but in serving a country that did not yet love them back. Their endurance changed the course of history. Their brilliance proved that technical mastery knows no color. As we celebrate Black history, we must ensure that the names of these drivers, the men who moved the world, are etched into the permanent record of human freedom. They were the heroes behind the wheel, the engines of democracy, and they will be forgotten no more.